Rivian's a good example. Rivian makes phenomenal cars, in my opinion. Rivian IPO'd 5 years ago, and everyone was like, this company makes amazing cars. Cars are awesome. I need to invest in stock. Well, what you didn't know is Rivian makes cars that are so good that they lose tens of thousands of dollars on every single Rivian that they made. The promise was also always, oh, well, we'll make a cheaper version. It took them now 5 years. They're just coming out with the cheaper version. So they spent 5 years selling something that lost money. It was a great product, but that's not what a business is made for.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of AWM Insights. It's your host, Justin Dyer, Chief Investment Officer here at AWM, joined as always by Mena, Hanna, Portfolio Manager here at AWM. And today we're gonna take a step back from current events. I know we've kind of gone to a variety of topics, not just current event focus over the last few episodes, and simply talk about the idea of, does a good product automatically make a good investment? I mean, the simple punchline is no, it doesn't automatically warrant a good investment. And reason why we're talking about this is it comes up a decent amount. Hey, look at this product. I love it. Should I, I want to invest, or, hey, I'm buying XYZ car, you name it, consumer good. I should also invest in that company. And the short answer is like, whoa. Let's think about it. Just because a product is well-liked does not mean it's an automatic good investment. And there's a number of examples, both in the public markets and private markets, that we'll touch on briefly to kind of walk through, hey, what happened here, what actually transpired, and hopefully just give you a little bit more perspective on the difference between a good product and a good investment. So I guess, Mena, let's just jump right into it. What's a good starting place here? I mean, like I said, it's a question I feel like, or a comment that we make quite a bit internally. And in a way, like what's kind of the root cause here? Is it behavioral? Like, is it emotional, kind of hype chasing? I know I'm asking you a leading question there, but take it away.
Yeah, I think it's actually pretty intuitive. Like, you would think a good product means that there was thought behind it. There's someone that created something that works, that should have market share, should capture market share, potentially even if you compare it to other things. Like, it should, if it's a good product, it should be consumed, and potentially consumed at a higher clip than it is today. Rivian's a good example. Rivian makes phenomenal cars, in my opinion. I'm a big car guy. Rivian makes great cars. If you were to look at a Rivian, and a lot of people did this, Rivian IPO'd, what is it now, 5 years ago, and everyone was like, this company makes amazing cars. Cars are awesome. I need to invest in the stock. Well, what you didn't know is Rivian makes cars that are so good that they lose tens of thousands of dollars on every single Rivian that they made. The promise was also always, oh, well, we'll make a cheaper version. It took them now 5 years. They're just coming out with the cheaper version to actually release that. So they spent 5 years selling something that lost money. It was a great product, but that's not what a business is made for. I wish you could get things way below their actual value forever, and that was commonality, but that just leads to bankruptcy. So there's definitely a dislocation between what you would intuitively think a good, brand product offering actually is, and what truly a good business and an investable business is.
Yeah, and I think it's super helpful, and we can go down the business model topic a little bit here, where it's both the business model, and maybe I'll extend that even to the competitive environment that exists. So in the world of venture capital, there's this infamous battle between Uber and Lyft amongst VCs, where they understood the dynamics of that market, and there was so much money thrown at those companies in particular, but even more broadly to rideshare apps that we don't even know about today. There was one called Sidecar. I tried it. That's probably aging myself. There's so many of our listeners and the team behind us never even heard about that, because it was just this cutthroat competition. And so yeah, great product, but the way the competitive dynamics worked within that in that space was such that there were only two winners, and a lot of people lost capital. And so there's competitive dynamics. There's business model structure. To your point, Rivian's a great example. Hey, guess what? They thought it was going to be a lot easier to build a cheaper vehicle. It's not. And so from an investment perspective, that's been an unfortunate outcome. Where that goes from here, well, that's for a later day. Another great one relevant to the present moment is Peloton. All of our listeners probably know about Peloton. Peloton just turned its first profit, and I think it went public at a level far beyond or far higher than where it is today. Yeah. And so, phenomenal product, culturally influential product that so many of us have in our houses. Yet, from an investment perspective, it's going to take a lot, especially for those early investors, to ever recoup really what their losses are on paper. I think one thing I want to talk about here is let's almost go through like the matrix, 2x2 matrix of how people should think about, and we'll stick we'll transition maybe rather to the private side of things. Hey, if you're looking at making a direct investment in the private markets, big asterisks there. That's insanely risky. So we're using this as a thought experiment. But in many of our listeners' cases, they're prominent figures. They have plenty of social media followers, et cetera. And there's value inherent in potentially getting involved in a company, usually on the consumer side of things. How would we think about that whole equation?
Yeah. I actually knew you were going to ask me this question. We didn't prepare for this one, but I have it down. So how much does it cost to make one, and what can I sell it for? I think those are two important questions just off the gate, because that helps you conceptualize what the profit margin is. Obviously, if it's a Rivian and the profit margin is negative, then you're really hoping for an evolution of the company, an evolution potentially in technology to kind of make that formula make sense, because that one doesn't, at least for now. The second one is like, who is going to buy the second one? Who's behind me in line? The tough part with that one, and sometimes the answer is no one needs to. Like, some of these products, if they're super niche, if you only need very limited sales, you can think about like high-end cars. Like maybe you are selling 10, 15, 20 a year, and there doesn't have to be a room full of consumers. But for the most part, you have to think about what the next future sale actually looks like. That was sort of Peloton's issue. Peloton made a ton of money on the hardware when people were, and I guess this was their first quarter, but they had a lot of consumption during COVID and a lot of people buying them. And from COVID on, their stock price is down 95%. It's pretty crazy. There wasn't that demand durability, and there wasn't a large pool of consumers. So you're effectively just stuck with your subscription revenue, and that's not a good business model. The last thing I would say is like, what is stopping someone from competing with you? GoPro is a good example of this. Like GoPro was an industry leader. Everyone had a GoPro when I was growing up, and it was sort of this hot commodity. Well, you had a ton of new entrants. You had people in China making GoPros for substantially less, and there was sort of no moat. There was no GoPro, since their IPO's down 98% in 2014. So you have a whole host of questions. I would say there's some quantitative questions just on profit margins. There's consumption questions based on who your buyer pool actually is, and then there's competitive advantage questions, which in the example of GoPro, those things can shift pretty quickly. And if there isn't kind of a technological advantage that you have, or potentially like a marketing advantage, then someone else is going to come in and steal market share.
Yeah, totally. I mean, on the GoPro topic, just this year, the founder had to personally lend the company $20 million just to keep the thing afloat.
Which is insane.
So, while turn of events there. I'll just ask a pointed question. For people investing in a direct company or getting equity for service, is it important to actually like the product?
Yeah, you have to. If you don't, if you're backing something that you don't believe in, I think there's a whole host of other risk factors that you expose yourself to. But I feel like you have to like the product. You have to be tied to it. You're tying your name to it. So you have to, but that is only one consideration. The business component is the second consideration. And there are potentially structures or possibilities where all of the three things that we talked about could potentially align, and you still get yourself in a bad business, a bad stock. I think Porsche is a great example of that. They have a moat, they have a great product, they make money, they have a consumer pool. I feel like everyone wants one, or maybe that's because I'm in the car world. But at the end of the day, they made some business mistakes leaning a little too far into the electrical car side, and their stock price is down 50% in the last 4 years. So you can have all of the above. You can have a good product. You can potentially like the product. And if the business is not set up in the right way to capture future consumers at a healthy margin, healthy clip, you're setting yourself up for failure. So I definitely think you need to like the product, but you also need to like the way that the business is set up, who's actually potentially running it, who's making decisions, the future trajectory of it. Looking at the product alone is just too simplistic.
Yeah, 100%. I'd just add to it as well. Yes, you need to like the product. You need to like the people running it, but you also need to be very real on the size of the market, right? Yeah. Just because it's something you like doesn't mean it's something millions of other people are going to be a huge fan of. And is that what the company's actually trying to do? Oftentimes we see startups where cool product, the assumptions in what the product is going to do is insane, right? It's like, oh, we're going to take over the world essentially. And it just doesn't happen very often. The other thing you have to just kind of square the circle here around is understand, especially in the world of startups, that as cool as the product may be, and this is kind of in line with what we've talked about here, the vast majority of startups go to zero, go bankrupt, go belly up. And that could be, hey, cool idea, but it's really freaking hard to turn that idea into a product. Or, hey, cool product, it's actually really hard to scale that product and manufacture it in a profitable way. I mean, you could throw Rivian into that mix now. Who knows where they'll go from here? But there's a lot of private examples in that situation where awesome product, insanely expensive to build, and there's all these assumptions that hey, the cost to build is going to plummet over time, and we're going to still be able to sell this for the same amount to hundreds of thousands of people. Those are all kind of real high level gut checks that we certainly look at when we're helping clients assess opportunities. And it's just really important, right? There's so many variables. It's important to understand there's so many variables when it goes into determining an investment decision. And then even on the flip side, really boring companies can make phenomenal investments as well. Like these things are not strongly correlated in one way, shape, or form. I mean, Warren Buffett has built just a legendary career. He built a legendary career along those lines, like investing in insurance businesses, which are some of the most boring businesses out there. See's Candy is another famous one that he invested in. Maybe someone has a sweet tooth and really likes them, but right, these boring businesses that just have a great capital structure and print money, if you will, because there's a simple, repeatable set of customers out there that love the product, that will pay the price that the company is setting, and you just clip your profits, and it becomes a really, really, really great thing. And I would argue, in a way, that we invest in the public markets, certainly from a value perspective, that's kind of inherently embedded in that general strategy, looking for good companies that are selling at a cheap price, right? Like that's a win-win type situation.
Yeah, and really going back to the product side and tying this all together, like a product is the tip of the iceberg. What actually has value and what materially makes something sound or makes an iceberg is everything that you don't see. So yeah, only looking at the product side, making an investment decision based off of the tip of the iceberg is usually a failing strategy.
Yeah, I mean, that's a perfect place to end. I would just underscore that, hey, don't get caught up in, I like this product, therefore it's a great investment. Could be the case, but there's a lot more. Like Mena just said, it really is just the tip of the iceberg. And if it's something you're getting involved in, whether it's from an endorsement perspective or otherwise, right, it is really important for you to be passionate and actually like that product so that the authenticity is present and really conveys value there. So anyway, we'll leave it there. Hopefully this was helpful. It's a great topic for us to talk about, but if you guys have any questions, definitely throw them our way. We always like talking about things that are relevant, as you know.
Yeah, 626-862-0355.
Awesome. And until next time, own your wealth, make an impact, and always be a pro.